What we're going to have after this on the panel, which lasts maybe 45 minutes to an hour, is going to be lunch out there. So you can mingle a lot more after this panel. But I thought it would be a good idea to have this panel after my 4 months in Silicon Valley. We had a conference in Stanford called Smart Nation, Silicon Valley, Technology and Connectivity Inclusion. So I think Cheng Mei has actually gave a very good speech. And I want to just say that I just want to summarize what he said in 3 C's. The 3 C is one, craziness, right? If you go to California, you always feel that everything is crazy, everything is fun, and the best part of California is that crazy ideas get rewarded. So that's where the ecosystem of startups and so on, that you will feel happy every day. The 4 months that I was in California, I don't have a single minute of boredom nor sadness. It's always so enjoyable. It's always so open. You see a mountain view. You are driving in an open space. And that's the first C. The second C is compassion. And if you go to all the startups that I visit, it's always about a sense of mission. Business is just, and in this era, not good enough to just be doing business and making money. You have to have a sense of mission about what problem you're solving. And that is something that is very crucial that I learned in the 4 months that I was there. And the third one, the third C is community. And you can see that when I was in California, everything is about sharing. Sharing of information, sharing of network, sharing of friendship, sharing of everything that you have is very interesting. So you see mentoring, and if your company information is not being shared with anyone, something is wrong with your company. And people are very happy to share their failures, because in California, failure is a badge of honor. So this is something that I learned in the last 4 months, and I felt that since I learned so much, so it's my time when I come back to share with more people, to share with you. While we are talking about Smart Nation, we're talking about ecosystem, we are talking about community, mentorship. It all starts from individual initiatives. And this is what Cheng Mei has basically summarized. And you look at him, he's basically Silicon Valley, right? And everybody out there, you can see that they are just like us. We are all Singaporean, right? But it's different when you're there in California. So this is where today I want to introduce my panel, because it's the perfect time to invite them here. On the extreme there is Michael. Michael Phoon is the Executive Director of Singapore Shipping Association. He has more than 20 years experience with HP in information technology and services with a P&L responsibility. So he has OEM sales, managed services, hardware, direct sales, business and market development. Michael, I don't know what else you have not done. Distribution channel, business partner, and he actually built a business for HP in Asia, and he's one of the returning bats that's back to Singapore, contributing in the private sector, and I think we'll learn more from you what you are doing at this moment. And next to him, on his right, is Eddy. In fact, this is the very first moment that I see Eddy, because I've never met you before. Yeah. But we spoke on the phone, and I heard a lot about you from a lot of audience out there in Mountain View, because we were working together, and we talked a lot about you wanting to come back and set up something for the pets. And you are a consulting professor and mentor at Stanford University, and you have invested and supported more than 50 startups, mainly in US, Singapore, Indonesia. Interest areas include mobile, health, big data, Internet of Things, and marketplaces. And you have recently relocated back to Southeast Asia to focus on health tech, especially for emerging market. And you work alongside with entrepreneurs and advise them. So that's very interesting things that you are doing, and clearly you're sharing all you have from Silicon Valley. And of course, next to me, as I call, Chef Nelson, because of his exceptional skill in cooking chicken rice. But he is actually a professor. Professor Nelson Tan from San Jose State University. He is the co-founder and board member of the Bay Area Tech Singaporeans. And I really like the name BADS, right? It's always have to do with tech, like Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Sina, and that's it's really a good name that all of you have thought of. He received his MFA, not Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? So his master's in fine arts. So, and whenever you think about fine arts, it's about, you know, paintings and all, but let us know what it is in communication design, you know, media studies, and you receive your diploma from Temasek Polytechnic. So one of us, very much one of us. And prior to teaching, you work with various media production agencies, production television, commercials, and broadcast design projects. And now you are a designer. And that is interesting. And I think to start off, I just want you to let us know your experience and what really is a designer.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for all this organizing this whole event is very exciting for us. So maybe I start off. So I am an educator at San Jose State University. My specialty is in user experience design. So I teach how to make people fall in love with digital products. So basically, it's a big buzz right now. Apart from that, like David mentioned, I'm one of the co-founder of BATS, which is a grassroots organization, Bay Area Tech Singaporeans. It started with 8 of us wanting to just get the Singaporeans in the Bay Area together to do something. And we started about a year ago, and today we have this live streaming and this channel to Singapore, and this is something really exciting, and we want to grow this channel and make it into a platform where conversations can happen within the region and in Silicon Valley. So back to your question about design. I work with engineers and product managers. In fact, I work with Eddy on projects. So in my area, it's not about the visual design. It's not just about making things beautiful, but there's a science behind it. There's how do people use their devices and their digital media? How do we get people to fall in love with them so that the products themselves actually solve the user's problems? So that's, in a nutshell, that's a study of that. That's my whole research area.
Yeah, so the design school is something that's very important in a lot of education institutions in California, especially. I see most of the universities has got design school, and then they have people going down to the ground like Myanmar or Africa to look at how products are being used by the needy and how to reduce the cost of the experiences. So designer is something is not like fashion designer, but technology designer.
And even to just tap onto that, it's actually driven by the companies over there in Silicon Valley. Apple just promoted Johnny Ive to the chief design officer, and you're going to see a lot of corporations doing that because they see the value in design. There was a study done that if your corporation truly plays design as one of the driving force of the company, it actually increases the value of your company by 288%. It's all calculated, so it's very interesting.
It's interesting, right? It's just not about P&L. It's more about how many customers are sticky to your products, and also the metric of valuation is completely different in Silicon Valley, and that's where I come to you, Eddy, because you're like a VC investor. A lot of companies in Silicon Valley, they don't make money at all, and back here, we are teaching the students, you have to do cash flow analysis, 20 years ahead, 5 years ahead. But what I'm seeing in 4 months, everything changed. People change job, companies go down, and the metric of valuation of company is so different. It's a totally different culture. So you want to let us know what you do when you were there, and tell us a little bit of what you were doing in Silicon Valley?
Sure. So first of all, David and also the SMU community, thanks for organizing this event, and it's an honor to be invited here as a panelist. Over the last 5 years, I have been in the Silicon Valley as an investor, investing in very early stage companies, sometimes the first money in. And also, I'm a faculty staff in Stanford School of Medicine, where I help projects turn into commercializable companies. At the same time, being a mentor at StartX, which is an incubator out of Stanford. So during this time over there, I regard VC as a service to entrepreneurs. If there's a lot of VCs are positioned high and mighty because they seem to hold the money, right? But what I feel is if without entrepreneurs, without founders, without new companies, there's no need for such a service. So at the height of startups valuation was about 2014, is when a lot of startups are able to command the valuation and decide who to take money from. And my job as a VC, in fact, I'm managing somebody else's money in order to create wealth for them. Right? At the same time, the target that I'm helping them to seek out is early stage companies that are typically only invested by investors who are taking high risk and who have some domain knowledge and able to provide a difference by not just investing, but actively helping the companies grow in recruitment, in product development, in access to customers. So my job is essentially that, to work alongside entrepreneurs.
That's why when I was in Stanford, I realized that the program is so successful where you have so many consulting professors from the industry, either from a VC or angel, that a lot of students never graduate. They do their MBA, they're there for 9 months, a year, they just never graduate. And this is so successful, So Micah, we are so-called in Singapore the old bird. We have been around for a lot of time. We grew up together, but I never see you for many years. You were spending a lot of time away from Singapore, and you were working with HP in Silicon Valley and California. So tell us a little bit about yourself for those years that I didn't see you.
Okay, so again, like Eddy, David, and the rest of the SMU faculty, as well as some distinguished guests I can see here, thank you for having us here. So back to your question. Yes, I spent close to almost, and I actually have a colleague in the audience here. I spent close to almost about 3 tours of duty in the US, mostly in California and Silicon Valley. In fact, after graduation from school in the US, HP actually was my third employer. When they came on campus to recruit, I actually turned them down because in the early 80s, I never knew what HP was. I thought it was just a calculator company because I was holding a HP 11C financial calculator, which I think you know. I was actually recruited by Pricewaterhouse. Eventually, I worked for their client, which is Williams-Sonoma. And actually on the daily commute back from San Francisco down to the Bay Area where I lived in Menlo Park, which is just next door to Palo Alto, I met the same college recruiter again, and we were just speaking and talking about what my plans were. And eventually, I began to realize that HP was, one of the big companies that were out there. Being a young Singaporean person at the time when I was just graduating, I didn't want to stay in the same area where I had lived and went to school, but I actually wanted to go to the big city like in San Francisco to work for, a bigger company. But then, ever since then, I never looked back. I think, as you all know, HP has been, I guess, the grandfather and probably one of the founding institutions to the start of Silicon Valley. My time there, it wasn't even called Silicon Valley. It was just one of the companies. In fact, when I was in school, I actually managed to see Steve Jobs and his other partner, Steve Wozniak. They were actually in school to sell Apple computers door to door in the dormitory. So that's the extent. I mean, I may look young, but I'm actually not that young. I'm quite old. My time in the US has been actually quite fun. In fact, David, I like your first few comments about the 3 C's. I think the first C was about being crazy, and crazy is being rewarded. And I think with that, the last one was quite good too, because when I started my first job in the US in San Diego, in fact, I took over from one of the guys that's sitting right here, Kevin. in San Diego, the manager that actually spoke to me said that, Michael, you're here now. The first thing I want you to do is not to worry about failure. Because if you don't fail, you never learn, and you never know what to move on to the next time around. I think that's the key thing. That's pretty much the big difference working in the US, where the community and your peers and your so-called mentor and your manager actually encourages you and tells you that it's okay to fail. That's a big difference, coming out from Singapore, going there, where we know that in school you feel you have a second chance, right? But I think that's the key thing, and that's the one thing that I really appreciate, my experience working and living in the US.
Yeah, I had the same feeling on that, and I pick up a few key things. Like one is like success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm, and success is how high you bounce after you hit the bottom. So there are a lot of keywords and key sentences and phrases in California that we hear a lot. If there's one thing that is a major difference that you mentioned between Singapore and Silicon Valley, what is it, Eric? Would you say besides what Michael said?
Having been, it was also my second tour of duty there, because previously I was there as an engineer at Marvell Semiconductors. It had a different view of Silicon Valley. But more recently, I managed to work with universities, private sectors, large and small companies. Some of the differences boils down to, I would say one big difference is the family, right? Because in Asian culture, I have Asian parents, I'm born and raised here, right? There is a innate responsibility to take care of our parents, right? So that itself restricts some of the ability for you to venture out there and take on something risky right out of school. Whereas in many other societies, many Western cultures, you don't have that responsibility. Or to a lesser extent, or depending on the family, maybe at 18 years old, you're asked to leave the home. You have to start out on your own. Yeah. And the other one is universities. In universities in the Bay Area, they are fortunate that there's a strong connection between the university and the entrepreneurship world. A lot of the entrepreneurs have done an internship in Google, Facebook, in the past, Intel, etc. Right? Even when they're students, right? When they graduate, their final year project is likely to be linked to one of these tech giants, leaders. And very often, they either graduate and start their own company or even do not graduate. And some of these companies that they start are tech companies, right, which is born out of their school project or their PhD thesis, right? And as they quit and I've backed a couple of these entrepreneurs who are PhD dropouts, they quit the PhDs, right? And the chairman of his company is his professor. And they raise money, the chairman goes on to be one of the board directors. And the cycle goes on, right? Where because they become successful entrepreneurs, they exit the companies, they become, in turn, the director, the advisor for the next company. So there's this strong connection between the universities and the startup world. So whereas over here, and I have been making 8 trips over the last 4 years, on average 8 trips per year to Southeast Asia. I've been quite fortunate that the fund I was at was able to invest both in US and Singapore, and I was able to get involved with great companies like Tech in Asia. Right? I did 3 rounds before they became the first company to go Y Combinator. 99.co, I invested in them as early investor before they were invested by Sequoia and Eduardo Severin, who is the co-founder of Facebook. So I've been in touch with the community here as well. The difference could be that in Singapore, as I mentioned, the family situation and societal demands is different. But there are also, that's not the end. There are things that you can make use of. Right? I encourage all the entrepreneurs to keep an eye out on opportunities of government grants. It is true that there is not such an active community of ex-entrepreneurs who are supporting you as angels, but there's government grants that you can make use of. from NRF, iGEM, etc. That can get you at least, okay, and that is with the aim of getting you a product before you establish some form of customers to show that you can raise money from early stage VCs who are NRFTI SVCs like, for example, Red Dot Ventures, etc. There's a whole group of these that can be found from Tech in Asia again. So the difference is that the initial part can be aided by government grants. And another big difference I would say is that everyone says it's difficult to hire engineers. It's the same over here. It's the same in the US as well. The only difference is that US engineers can be hired at $200,000 a year. Over here, the difficulty is that you probably have to pay enough on a per month basis, which now what I hear is about $4,000 or $5,000 in order to hire a foreigner in on a work permit, on an employment pass. So the bar is different, the difficulty is the same. In Southeast Asia and even all over the world right now, the workaround is that can you work with a remote team? Can you manage, can you brand yourself as a Singapore company, and can you base your development team out of Vietnam, out of Philippines, right? And now you have so many teleconferencing opportunities for you to work remotely to get your UX done, for example in Silicon Valley through Nelson's team, or can you work with a software development team out of Eastern Europe, which I have done when I was in Silicon Valley. So those are the key factors that you have to leverage based on your situation, and Singapore has an advantage that it is very near to places like Vietnam or Philippines, where you can enjoy face-to-face time with your remote team as well.
That's very interesting. In fact, I observed that the community spirit is so strong that it's always the same group of VCs, same group of startups, and people are so proud to tell the VCs that how many times they failed. So they have, the more failures you have, you know the people and they know you still can raise the funds. So that's something very unique in that place. And we're just thinking that our generation, right? Our generation, a lot of us are very good executives that we can actually manage company. And when I go to a lot of Silicon Valley company, I see a lot of us managing companies. But the younger generation, I'm seeing a lot more now setting up a company. I see some startups here in the audience who I met in Silicon Valley initially. Now they are back in Singapore. And the question is, what skill set do you need for this new economy?
So this is a question that a lot of students ask me as well. But I always answer the same kind of a response. And that is, there's only one constant in the environment that we are in today, and that's change. And if the person cannot adapt to change or is unwilling to adapt to change, that's going to be tough. So I would say the skill set that any young entrepreneur or anyone who wants to be successful in this time that we are, very interesting time that we are living in right now, is to be able to see problems, be able to understand that they can change some of these problems through their innovation, and also when there's new change comes, they can be able to adapt very easily. So a process of lifelong learning is something that myself as an educator, I focus a lot. Yeah, and I put it in my own perspective. When I went to design school at Temasek Poly, the things that I've acquired, over there is 180 degrees different from the things that I'm doing today. And if I were to stick myself in that mindset from 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here. And it's just changing too fast, and we have to be really adaptive to that.
So there's a time compress happening here where things are changing very fast. Skill set is probably more about asking what question, what solution you're looking for, what problem you have. Micah, I think I'll go back to you because you have seen it from the beginning. Probably have seen how Stanford, in the early years with Dean Thurman, and how Silicon Valley came out from nowhere, Steve Jobs and so on, that has grown from nothing to where it is. So putting yourself now back in Singapore, where do you see Singapore will grow in this new digital environment?
Actually, that's quite an open question, David. I think that Eddy, you mentioned, and David, you mentioned there are also some entrepreneurs out here right now, right?
Yes.
In tech, and so I want to, and hopefully, may I just ask of your acceptance if I can just patronize you a bit about my thinking out for the next outlook for Singapore itself. There are actually a few trends that are coming up, which I think you can see very clearly. But if you were to spot the next few trends by the time you come up from school or by the time you begin, it may be a bit too late. So one of the things that I've seen so far in my time that I was working in the US and seeing how small little ventures became very successful because they were able to see about 10 years ahead of time and maybe spot something that no one actually really thought about. It became an aha moment. So back to your question, David, I think what I see ahead is the following. There are two things that are likely and have probably surfaced. One is likely, of course, as you know, the silver age is coming upon Singapore itself, right? I think that's, if you're going to address it, I would suggest let's move on because I think there are already work being done in the area. What is very interesting, which I hope that, and I can inspire the entrepreneurs to look at, is pretty much in the future of renewable and clean energy for Singapore itself. And much has been said about the last few days and the last few months has been about, the oil price has kind of come down. Maybe there's no longer a momentum and a push for new energy because we can still get fossil fuel. But I want to link this back because I heard the talk with that Chuen has talked about and about giving back the community because I also am an aspiring volunteer and I did spend some time in the kitchen of Willing Hearts, and I also delivered food. And I began to realize, and I think many of us realize, that there are also quite a few opportunities out there for all of us that we can actually do for ourselves with technology. One of the things you can look at, I'm just probably running ahead of the game, is to give you an idea, maybe hopefully help you visualize that sometime in the future I would like to see someone in this room or someone in Singapore look at, investing in or creating or even putting out a technology where we can incorporate clean energy that can actually give it to society. There were many households that I went into that they were so poor that they only had candles to light up for themselves. And they weren't able to even turn on the light bulb or even have a fan in the room. It was really, really hot. And to think about maybe having, solar panels on top of the HDB flat, putting back into the grid, the excess power to channel back to these households who are marginalized, I think that was something that would be kind of good, and it's going to be a feel-good factor that we can look at. I think in the future, that kind of a social enterprise that you look at would likely, I think, gain a lot more in terms of exponential growth for you folks. But that's just my point. I hope that is something that you guys can think about.
Yeah. So from the California lens, it's like if you look at any situation which is unreasonable, some of these situations are very unreasonable, and you can find a good solution, you probably have a unicorn in the making. So I think that is something, and not only in Singapore, probably in our neighbors, Myanmar, Indonesia, and so on. There's still a lot of rural area that needs a lot of technology that we can do good. So it's always about a sense of mission, right? In technology can always do good, and technology can do bad as well. But those that we see in California, at least I see, is always have a sense of mission on doing good and trying to solve a situation where there's a lot of unreasonable situation that you are not happy with, and then that's the problem you try to solve. So, Eddy, what else do you see in Silicon Valley that you want to share with us before we go on to have an open up for question?
Sure. Right. I'm a health technology guy. That's my latest training in bioengineering. So I am, this trip back, relocating my family, myself, back from Silicon Valley back to here, is that I want to put more time, put more focus on health technology, right? And also for Southeast Asia in particular. A couple of things why I'm inspired to do that. I was trained as an electrical engineer. I was trained to make things faster, cheaper, more convenient. Right? As cell phones become smaller, right? But what motivated me to go into bioengineering is, can we find diagnostics to diagnose, let's say, cancer stages one stage earlier, and make a huge impact on the survivability. And the Asia context, when one person falls sick, the whole family is in trouble. Can we make a huge difference to the economic outcome of the family as well by detecting things a little earlier? Right? So there's a huge opportunity in the diagnostic area in Singapore. Another thing I'm looking for in Southeast Asia is we have been doing very well in startups of consumer internet companies. For example, e-commerce companies, right? Taxi sharing companies. We are not, a lot of these companies are localized successes, works typically within a small area. Can we support companies such as in the health technology that can go regional or become global solutions? Singapore is in a unique situation where I see products and companies built from here can address two unique Asia markets. In Asia, there's one market where, for example, the flagship store of Louis Vuitton in Hong Kong, the typical waiting time on the line outside is 1 hour. And everyone who managed to go in after 1 hour are restricted to buying just 2 handbags. They're afraid that somebody will buy out the whole store. On the other hand, in the other part of Asia, there are 500 million people, as Hugh from GFDI I always chat, 500 million people in India. They do not want a connected toilet who can analyze your urine for 10 different vital signs. They just want a clean toilet. Right? We have the base of the pyramid, 4 billion people who are living below the poverty line. Can we have different health technology that improves their outcome? Take, for example, there was an innovation in Stanford several years ago. The innovations solved the problem of premature birth, where 20 million babies are born prematurely. And because there isn't the access to an incubator, which costs tens of thousands of dollars, in order to keep their temperature 37 degrees Celsius, right? 450 premature babies die per hour. It's incredible statistics. But this team in Stanford, they came out with a $200 solution. It is a jacket made of a phase change material. You plug it into microwave or some other heating mechanism, goes to 37 degrees, stays like that for 6 hours. And use it to wrap around a baby, costing only $200. And the added advantage is that the mother can still cuddle the baby. So can we have frugal innovations like this where examples are cell phone casings that analyze your ECG, right? Where a microscopic lens connects to your cell phone for cervical tests. And this allows diagnostics tests to be done in rural areas so that there's advanced warning to bring these people to their capital, to Singapore for the follow-on checkup. So I think advances in frugal innovation to drive hardware costs to near zero, right, is an opportunity not just to serve the rural population, but in this world where things like the Xiaomi band, right? The first wearable that I supported in 2011 is a wristband. The selling price is $150. Then people realize that week in, week out, weekday I have a certain activity, weekend I have different activity. I don't need to wear the band, and they stop wearing the band. And then came Jawbone, Fitbit, which drive the prices further lower, and Xiaomi now, this band is costing only US $13. So we are in a world where hardware is driving towards zero, and frugal innovation can, in a way, develop products that serve the world market as well.
So what you say is very interesting. In fact, that was a major observation I had. So before I went, whenever I talk about impact investment, and they would just say that, oh, we are VCs for investment, we always invest for returns, and we are not going to do any charitable, because there's corporate social responsibility. But when I went to Stanford, there are all the students where they're looking at all the design, like what you do, you have your students, I'm sure, they all have a sense of mission, and they came out with all this design to keep the baby warm, the handphones for payments and so on. So it actually impact investment is a big asset class and is proven by the design schools in California. And again, it's like a sense of mission in technology that will bring, I suppose, like both of you back to Asia, not purely because there's a market there, but the sense of mission. And that seemed to be the message I'm continuing to get when I was in California. So you agree with that with your students project?
Yeah. So one of the kind of rule of thumb that, and this is an environment in Silicon Valley generally, is that we can create and make, and design anything you can imagine of. But the real question is, should we? What is the real purpose of the product that we are going to create? What kind of problems can we solve with it? And this is a huge paradigm shift in terms of the Singapore community and the Singapore environment, because again, my recollection of growing up here, the cheaper, the better, your IP, IT, that equals good, but not necessarily. It's more about whether we can, see the value of the problems that we're trying to solve, and that is Silicon Valley.
So you see products which are selling $10, but because in ASEAN you have 600 million people and maybe 60-70% in the rural area, you can sell $10 a piece. You can actually reach out to a lot of people and do a lot of good. And that's what I see a lot of businesses in Silicon Valley that's scaling very, very well with low margin, but doing a lot of good and grow. It's just not CSR. Impact investment is actually a very good asset class. Now, with that, I want to open the question to the floor. Please state your name, your affiliation, and then your question is directed to which panel member. Can I have the first question? Yeah, please. Maybe we can give you a mic somewhere. Let me get a mic. Yeah.
My name is Tan Chit Ping, a graduate of our local university. At that time, they called it University of Malaya. I just want to ask the panelists, all this new tech invention, all that sounded very good, very progressive. But have you thought of the impact on the societies and so on? Before you start inventing. Of course, it's nice to invent this, invent that, and all that. But the thing is, have you thought of the consequences this invention is going to have on the society, particularly, as you say, the rural poor and so on, and all that? Therefore, there ought to be a course in all these tech schools to have the social impact of your study and your invention, so that before you start inventing this thing to catch a big mice or whatever it is, think of the extinction of the mice. Then in the future, people will know, hey, what is a mouse look like? I don't know. I only know the electric mouse I have in my computer. Therefore, all this social impact and so on ought to be taught in some of the schools, particularly the tech schools. So do you agree?
This is more a question for Nelson, maybe for myself.
Yeah. So in the U.S. U.S. education, there's a lot of social responsibility built into the curriculum, especially with the liberal arts curriculum. A lot of the students that's coming out from the universities, they don't start off by developing a product because of the technology and it's so advanced. I would say a majority of students developed the technology because they want to try and solve some social problems. And the money that comes with it is not the driving factor. And so, again, I'm unfamiliar with the Singapore context. I'm sure SMU is a very good school, but the social part of the curriculum is, I assume it's important in the Singapore context. So I think that is the main difference. And I
think there are a lot of courses in ethics and about the technology that do good and so on. I think that is something that's always part of the curriculum. But I think the market forces is actually driving towards doing good for technology. So in fact, the market is really driving towards that direction. People don't want technology that cause addiction. People don't want technology that actually do bad. And you will see, I think going forward, that is going to happen even more after my trip to that. Any question? Next question? Yes, Jerry.
Hi, my name is Jerry. I'm from Tafet. It's a startup in Singapore. We help to try to innovate the way of dining. Okay, we try to make a restaurant Uber dining experience. So I want to throw this question to Eddy. Okay, I have two questions. First one is I heard you now move back to Asia. So as you do a comparison, what is the good and bad as in Silicon Valley as compared to Singapore as for a startup to go? This is first question. And the second one, I heard you will focus on health and all kind of technology innovation in this area. So what's the reason make you to think to come back to here? Does it very important for you to think this is a very good market? Or just now the Michael mentioned that silver age is coming to Singapore. But I assume now it's 5 million people here, so not very big size. So what's the vision after that?
I think the question is it roots from my reason for moving here and what do I see as an opportunity for startups here, different from there. In the US, your market is the first homogeneous market is definitely Silicon Valley itself, if not the whole US, right, under one set of law. Whereas in Singapore, naturally, you are comparing 330 million people over there versus 5 million over here. Because Southeast Asia is extremely heterogeneous, guarded by different laws and laws that change very quickly. Right? So that's the first key difference. And the opportunity I see is that Silicon Valley will always, there are many cities of excellence now. By reports, last year the fastest growing city in entrepreneurship was Berlin. And we know that cities in Asia Pac include Sydney doing well, Tokyo, Shanghai, Beijing, right? In Europe you have London, and US, even New York is doing very well, LA as well. There will be many other satellite cities coming up, and Silicon Valley, I bet, will stay the largest because there's no need to replace them. But doesn't mean that these other cities will not become extremely important. Well, I look at the Southeast Asia ecosystem as being at a point of inflection where it has done its homework and realizing that growing local companies is not enough to breed unicorns. Take for example, the largest C2C marketplace in Indonesia, 250 million people, okay? The largest one is Tokopedia. Valuation is 200. You move a step up, Zalora, right? It serves fashion but multiple markets, valuation 500. You move a step up, Grab Taxi is 1 plus, right? Because it's all over Southeast Asia. Lazada is 1 plus B as well, all over Southeast Asia. But you go one more further step up, Garena. Garena is a global company born out of Singapore. The valuation is over 2. So this points to the fact that you have to be a regional company at least, right, to be doing exceedingly well, if not global. So what's the opportunity I see in Singapore is that it's not a local market. Whatever you grow here from day one, you have to get out of Singapore, right? Just like the way Israeli run their startup. From day one, they are 8 million people, we are 5. No difference, right? But the innovation per capita is much higher there as compared to here. But the mentality is the same. From day one, you have to get out from your comfort zone. You want to develop MVP here, your MVP is probably not the same MVP as Jakarta. So you have to get out of Singapore as the first criteria in building products. Right. Being in Singapore has advantages because of our clean governance. And if you want to raise money, take for example, you want to target, let's say you have a product that is suitable for Jakarta market or Thai market, you're choosing one or the other. But you might want to incorporate the company over here, all right, and form perhaps a conditional stock purchase agreement or some other linkages, right? And this Singapore becomes a holding company to the company in Indonesia, and you raise money through Singapore, this helps you in your future funding. Because outside of ASEAN, people do not put their money into a non-Singapore company, typically. Right? So you have to look into those things. And it helps you in fundraising, it helps you in hiring as well. You're branding as a Singapore company, it helps you when you're getting acquired. Many reasons. Right? So you have to start working with the investor to strategize what's best for your company.
Not forgetting in Singapore got the best food. Yeah. Michael, you want to say something? Yeah. Okay. One last question that we can get from the audience. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'd just like to check about your point of funding. Okay, I'm Russell from the Masters of Wealth Management program, and I do have a friend who did a startup company and raised funding through Kickstarter in addition to all the government grants in Singapore. So as you were mentioning, he did run into some roadblocks due to cash flow. And the issue is, do you think Kickstarter or Indiegogo are viable sources of funding for startups? Especially as you mentioned, you're trying to sell your product globally, not just in Singapore, compared to, say, your traditional VC or government grant type of funding?
I'll try to answer this question. Nowadays, there are many alternative sources of funding. It used to be to raise money for a startup, you have to make your way to Sand Hill Road at Menlo Park. And the VCs will stay in their ivory tower. You have to find really hard to know someone who knows them so that you can get a meeting. It used to be that. Okay? And they don't even go out of Silicon Valley because all startups all over outside of the valley will go to them too. But things have changed, right? There are so many alternative sources of funding. Right, from the bottom up, you have individuals. Anyone who's an accredited investor can put money in the private startup, right? And you have government funding, like you said. You have crowdfunding as well. These are online platforms like AngelList or even Kickstarter, right? And from the top down, you have family offices who are doing direct investment, hedge funds, mutual funds doing direct investments from the top down. So for early stage financing, you have a variety of ways to take money from. But who you take money from at early stage, especially at early stage, is when the money is less important than what the person does beyond money. It's extremely important. Take for example, Kickstarter is supposed to allow you to validate your product, right, by having customers, would-be customers pay. And then this will de-risk you such that you build a product since I showed that there's customer. But bear in mind, people who buy on Kickstarter are early adopters. They are not your real mass market customers. And this has been shown statistically, so many products from Kickstarter fail after raising money. And fail because they cannot sell. And the second reason why they fail is because they cannot build it. Kickstarter raises money on a video, right? I believe it's a fantastic platform to get exposure and marketing, right? But using it as a fundamental source of fundraising instead of tapping into the people, let's say you want to build an IoT product. You should raise money from someone who has done a hardware startup or built a hardware startup before. They are maybe fundamentally engineers, or they have connections to, let's say, Flextronic, etc., to help you build it. So that connection, the investor that you bring in should become part of your team, right? They should be complementing what you do not have.
Eddy, thank you. I was going to add that I think I had dinner with one of an angel investor in Singapore. One of the things that he mentioned to me, which I thought was quite insightful, was that a lot of times when they invest in a startup, the startup folks, of course, the engineer or the owner has a lot of passion. And so he's getting maybe about 3 or 4 of his people that share the same vision. But that group doesn't necessarily have the expertise to bring it beyond that. And like you mentioned early on, I think you need to also look back. It's not just how do you get a sustained level of funding to bring yourself to market. It's actually what you need to look at is to find out who in your team or who can you bring into your team to help you also manage that funds and also help you to optimize your area of expertise to bring it to market. I like the fact that you talk about the thing that if, for example, if you're looking at manufacturing it, maybe get an expert person that was in Flextronics, in the contract management to find out for you how fast and how efficient can you get it done, and whether is that a realistic timeline or is it a realistic design that can be produced in volume and in scale. I think that's the key thing. It's not just about funding. It's really about getting and having to recognize that you need people that come in to help you to move to the next stage. That was the takeaway that I got when I was having dinner with an angel investor. So that's from their mouth. I just want to share it with you.
What about another stock, the so-called angel, who's supposed to be able to spot the ability of your product and support you throughout the whole journey?
So, Mr. Tan, I think there are two. I think that there's a misperception. When an angel investor begins to have a belief, he's thinking about the long term. He may not be the one that expects to say, I'm going to now take you on a journey to bring it from idea to the actual production to realization. And that journey, you need to bring in experts to help you along every part of the journey. When you reach a certain milestone, you maybe got to bring in a marketing guy. When you reach a certain milestone, you got to bring in a PR guy or whatever that's going to be, right? And when you reach that final milestone, you may have to bring in a sales guy or a channel person to be able to place that product or that service onto the right channel itself for you to gain that mass market appeal. So that's the thing that I wanted to share.
So I want to add on to your answer to Michael's. I'm in computer security a long time. In computer security, there's a lot of startups and all that. In 2002, 2003, we had the .com bust. Everybody sell the Ferrari, cut away ponytail. After that, everybody got very benefit. After the .com bust, angel investors are now very careful. It's not like, oh, here's some money, please invest. No, I want a business plan, I want to A, B, C, D, E. Also, angel investors today, they are still there, but they're not so free anymore. They're very, very careful. So this is what happened to them.
Okay, that's very good comment for closing. I still see a lot of interest there. I'm very glad to see a lot of students and a lot of startups, entrepreneurs here. So I conclude by saying this, that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Dreaming, believe it or not, is a form of planning in this disruptive economy. So if you can dream of a good solution to anything unreasonable, you have a unicorn in the making right here in Singapore, surrounded by 600 million people with about 4 hours flight time. So if you ever dream about going to Silicon Valley, I know quite a few of you do, don't. Just do it. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. And before we thank our panel, I would just like to invite Ms. Karen Liu, the Deputy Director of Engagement, Strategy and Programs, Overseas Singaporean Unit, to say a few words to close off before I thank the panel. Thank you.